right, Lascampo. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Deputy Pringle.
And I welcome the opportunity to contribute to the debate this evening. And I suppose, as everybody probably knows, I don't have a background in farming myself, so some of what I say might be, you'll have to pardon my ignorance maybe in relation to some of it. But you know, I think looking at this, you know, I'm struck by all through last year in the House here and in the committee, the Agriculture Committee in which I sit. There was a lot of discussion about how positive the ending of quotas would be in 2015, and at the end of March that there was no downside, and it was all going to be upside for farming and for the dairy sector, and particularly in 2015 when quotas ended. And then a couple of weeks before the end of the year, the commodity price collapsed in the international markets, and the next thing we were overrun with doom and gloom and crisis is going to be, and the 2015 was going to be such a bad year and all this kind of stuff here. And it just shows you the vagaries of the market and how things can fluctuate, and that's, I think, is probably what's going to be a feature of the dairy sector for the next number of years. But I'm also struck by and I know that there is some positives in this change, and that's welcome, I suppose, on a national basis. But I'm also struck, and I think about, you know, I come from Killybegs, where a fishing port, and in the 1970s there was probably up to 90 boats fishing out of Killybegs. Today there's 25. And that's come through rationalisation and increasing capacity and stuff like that. And there's more ex-fishermen that I know in Killybegs now than there is fishermen. And you know, and I'm wondering, is this something that's going to be a feature of the next few years as well within the dairy sector? You know, there is 18,000 dairy farmers at the moment in the country, and 6,000 of those produce 60% of the milk. So you know, I think I can't see any other way but that there will have to be some rationalisation within the sector. And that the number of farmers, some farmers will, through no fault of their own and through their inability to significantly increase their production and maximise their income, will end up being squeezed out. And I think that's something that we should also be preparing for, while preparing for the positives, and that there is there, and the Minister outlined the significant investments that are taking place and plan to take place in the south of the country to gear up for this increase in production, and that is true. But I think we will see a change within the farming sector and within the dairy sector, where some people will have to move out, and farms will have to increase in size and decrease capacity to be able to avail of the extra production and extra income that would be required, and particularly as probably prices will settle out at a lower rate than they have been over the last couple of years, as I would believe, because it is from a situation that the quotas are ending right across Europe. So every country in Europe, dairy farmers are gearing up to increase production and to capitalise on the ending of quotas. So that will bring on pressures as well in relation to price. And I know it's been outlined that we are at an advantage here because of our predominantly grass-based production, and that helps to keep costs down. And I remember a few weeks ago, the Positive Farmers Group made a presentation in the Oireachtas Committee in terms of how farmers can increase their margins or keep their margins positive by becoming more grass-rich in terms of their production and that. But I always understood that our agricultural sector was already very grass-rich, and that it was one of the big selling points for our agricultural sector. So I'm just wondering how much more capacity there is to improve in relation to that for the dairy sector across the country. And maybe, Minister, you could expand a wee bit on that in your contribution and your summing up, because I think that's something that in order to be able to maintain incomes, farmers have to be able to improve the amount of grass or grow the amount of grass that they're using in terms of their production, and reduce their input costs or keep their input costs lower to be able to avail of the benefits from increased production. And I don't want to see a situation where farmers have to endlessly increase production just to stand still, and that, I think, is a real risk that could happen from the ending of the quota regime as well. And I think from looking at it, it's interesting to see that we recently visited the Agricultural Committee in Stormont, and heard presentation there in relation to the dairy sector in the 6 counties, who effectively have not had quotas for the last 20 years because the UK didn't use up its full quota, and there was extra quota available for 6 counties farmers, and they increased production to take up that slack. And they were suffering from very severe price pressures there, and also from very severe input costs. And I saw comparisons where the cost of feed compared to Northern Ireland, from Northern Ireland and the south here, was something like over €1,000 per hectare in the north, and about €260. I think it's €260 per hectare in the south here. So that leads me to think that we are already a very grass-rich production, and so I just wonder how much more can be squeezed out of increasing that and increasing production in that way. So I think that leads me to believe that inevitably there will have to be rationalisation within the sector, and that the tradition we have seen and we have in this country of the small family farm, and that providing an income for the family in that in the dairy sector will change. I don't know how much it'll change, and that presents challenges. And I mean, it's not necessarily, progress always brings change, and increasing production methods, everything else brings those changes. The question we have to do, I suppose, is try and minimise those changes. And if the big selling point that we have for our dairy sector is that it's a green, grass-led production, how does that marry with rationalisation that will take place? I suppose just looking at it, there could be in the region of about a couple of thousand farmers I would foresee that would end up out of dairy production, and whether that's out of farming completely or not, I don't know. And of course there will be other opportunities for other jobs or whatever in the rural sector because of the investments that are taking place in relation to the sector as well. So I think that's just something that has to be managed, and something that will lead to change across rural Ireland. I know that the Minister has been fairly active in terms of the things that the government can do, and the Dairy Forum will help to maybe smooth out some of those problems, taxation measures that have been brought in, and increasing maybe the 5-year averaging that allows farmers to ease out their taxation bill. That will help farmers to compete. And the one other thing that I would be worried about is how we're impressing on the banks to be flexible. I think if we're relying on the banks, well, then we're in big trouble. And the experience that I can see of banks across the country is not that they're there to serve the interests of the people that are in debt to them. And the banks have always been looked favourably in lending to farmers, and that's because they have assets that they can be leveraged against that debt. When those assets come under pressure, that's when we're going to really see how the banks, their faith they have in this sector, and I hope that it'll work okay. But I think we can't put too much store on the banks to look after people.
Thank you, Deputy.